They told me to wait by the lounge. Said they'd check us in together. Just needed to sort something out at the counter. So I waited. Watched the crowd shuffle past. Watched the board update our flight from on time to boarding now. 35 minutes later, I realized the truth. They were gone. My son, the boy I raised alone. My ex-wife, the woman who vanished once and had now vanished again, this time with my only child by her side. No call. No seat booked. Just me, a suitcase, and a lie I believed in. Welcome back to Revenge with James, where betrayal meets backbone, where silence isn't weakness, and those who thought they left us behind eventually find out we were just getting started. If you've ever been discarded, dismissed, or quietly erased by people you once loved, this story is for you. Before the airport, before the silence and the suitcase, my world was small, predictable, not unhappy, just quiet. I lived in a modest two-bedroom house in a neighborhood where people nodded but didn't stop to talk, where the grass was always trimmed just enough to avoid attention, and the only thing louder than the birds in the morning was the hum of old air conditioners in the summer. My mornings started the same way they had for years. 55 a.m., one scoop of ground coffee into a dented French press. I still used the same chipped mug my son gave me when he was 12. It said "World's Coolest Dad" in peeling blue letters. Steel-cut oats, no sugar, a radio that only played one station, mostly news and a few songs that reminded me of better decades. I'd iron my shirt whether I had plans or not. Habit from my old job, operations manager for a freight company, before they cut costs and let the old-timers go. Sometimes I'd read the paper. Sometimes I'd just sit on the porch, let the morning sun hit my face, and listen to the silence. My world had shrunk after retirement. My calendar wasn't full, but my peace, it was mine. And in that silence I still believed I had something left, something to offer, maybe even someone to forgive. So when the call came, when my son said, "Dad, we've been thinking about you, Mom and I want to talk, really talk. What if we took a trip together?" I didn't hesitate. I dusted off the suitcase, pressed the shirts, bought new shoes. I thought I was packing for peace. I didn't know I was packing for war. My ex-wife's name is Evelyn, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make people feel like they were lucky to be standing near her. Always put together, pearls, perfume, perfect posture. She was beautiful, still is, but her beauty always felt conditional, like you had to earn it. When we first met, I mistook polish for warmth. It wasn't until years later that I realized Evelyn didn't fall in love. She formed alliances. When our son was born, I thought that would change things, that something soft might finally take root in her. But Evelyn never really softened. She was more of a performance parent. PTA smiles, holiday cards, photos posed just right. Behind closed doors, she was quieter, colder, the kind of person who could ask, "Did you forget the milk?" and make it feel like a moral failing. Still, I loved her, and for a long time, I thought love meant staying quiet through disappointment. Then one day, she packed a bag and left. No affair, no screaming, just a note by the coffee maker. "I'm tired. You always think you're doing enough, but enough for you isn't enough for me." That was 15 years ago. Our son, Daniel, was 17 then, and I did my best to hold the center. I went to his track meets, cooked dinners I had to learn from scratch, sat up late editing college essays I barely understood. We were close for a while. Not perfect, but connected. I'd drive 3 hours just to see him for lunch when he was in university. Then somewhere around graduation, he started fading. Calls got shorter. Visits got more spaced out. He always had a reason: work, stress, the city being too far. But I knew the real reason. Evelyn had drifted back in. She'd show up in his social media photos again, smiling at some art gala I wasn't invited to, laughing in a kitchen I'd never seen. There was one Christmas, the last one we all spent together. I handed Daniel a watch I'd saved up for, something engraved, meaningful. He smiled, politely, said, "Thanks, Dad." Then Evelyn handed him a small box. Inside was a pair of designer cufflinks. Name brand, sleek, expensive. Daniel lit up. Real joy. He hugged her first. I pretended not to notice, but I did. You always notice the moment someone stops choosing you. So when he called years later, asking me to take a trip with them, I told myself maybe this was his way of making space again. Maybe he missed me, maybe he realized what I gave, but maybe I was still the easiest one to use. Before I even touched my suitcase, I stood in the hallway for a good 5 minutes, just staring at the guest room door. That's where I kept the old things. Photos, his baseball glove, the Pinewood Derby car we built when he was 9, crooked wheels and all. I opened the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and let my hand rest on that dusty glove. I wasn't just packing for a trip. I was packing for a second chance. You see, for some men, legacy is written in buildings or bank accounts. Mine was Daniel. His pride in me, when he was young, was the closest thing I ever felt to winning at life. He used to tell his teachers, "My dad can fix anything." I wasn't perfect, but I showed up. paid every bill, taught him how to patch a tire, write a thank you letter, shave without nicking your neck. And when Evelyn left, I thought, if I can just keep him grounded, I've done my job. So when he stopped calling, it didn't just feel like losing a son, it felt like losing my anchor. My father, the man who raised me, always told me, your worth is what you leave behind in a man's spine. I wanted to be the kind of father my own dad was to me. Quiet, solid, present, but somewhere along the way, I think Daniel stopped seeing strength in that. Started listening to Evelyn's voice more than mine. Her world was sleek, fast, polished. Mine? It was Sunday stew, patched jeans and long silences that said more than lectures ever could. I thought maybe, just maybe, this trip would remind him, not of my money or my convenience, but of my steadiness, of the kind of man he used to brag about before he learned to be embarrassed by simplicity. So I laid out my best shirt, polished my shoes, packed a book he used to love, thought we might read a chapter together, maybe laugh about how bad the ending was. I told myself, this time, it's not about proving anything. It's just about being there. But looking back, I think part of me still wanted him to look at me and say, that's my dad, and mean it. We arrived at the airport together. Daniel was in a hurry, kept checking his phone, tapping the screen like it owed him something. Evelyn had on sunglasses indoors, said the lights were too harsh. We barely spoke on the drive there. I told myself it was early. People don't talk much before sunrise. But when I tried to joke about the time we missed a flight to Disneyland when Daniel was 7, neither of them laughed. He nodded. Barely. Evelyn was scrolling Instagram. I let it go. When we got to the terminal, I reached into my coat pocket to double-check the reservation info, the one I was told we'd booked together. But Daniel waved it off. We've got it handled, Dad. You just wait by the lounge. It'll be quicker if we do it ourselves. I hesitated. My gut flickered, but I smiled, nodded, took my place by the row of seats beside the window. I watched them walk toward the counter, talking closely, Evelyn's hand on his back, a gesture that years ago she only reserved for manipulation. I told myself not to overthink it, but then minutes turned into 20. The line at the counter had cleared, yet they hadn't come back. I checked my phone. No texts. I checked the flight board. Flight 173-4, now boarding. My name wasn't on the manifest. I walked to the counter, asked the woman behind the desk to look up my booking. She checked. I don't see a reservation under your name, sir. I said maybe it was under my son's. She found 2 seats, Daniel and Evelyn. No third. She smiled apologetically. I stood there for a moment. Not angry, not even confused, just still, as if the floor beneath me had quietly shifted and I was just catching my balance. I pulled out my phone again, opened my banking app. The hotel reservation I paid for had been canceled and rebooked, under another name. The refund never hit my account. There was a new charge instead. Same chain, different location. I checked the timestamp. It had been changed the night before. I stared at the screen for a long time. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't even shocked. It just felt like I'd been slowly walking into a room where the lights kept dimming, and I had finally noticed that I couldn't see the door anymore. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation. All it took was one photo. A cousin sent it, just a screenshot. There they were, Evelyn in a silk wrap, holding a mimosa by the edge of a rooftop infinity pool. Daniel beside her grinning. The caption said, family time. Finally, they were already there, already checked in, already gone. I didn't even finish reading the comments. I just sat back in that hard airport seat and stared out at the tarmac. And slowly, without warning, my mind pulled me backward to a different time. Daniel was 11. We had driven through a snowstorm to get to his school play. He was playing the third wise man, had one line and a paper crown that kept slipping down over his eyes. Evelyn was supposed to come. She didn't. She said something about a work dinner. I remember standing in the front row, cheering louder than everyone else, trying to make up for the empty seat beside me. Later that night, he came into my room in his pajamas and said, "It's okay, she missed it, Dad. I saw you. You were smiling the whole time." That moment, his voice, his small hand on my arm, that stayed with me longer than any birthday, any gift, because it was real. It was love without polish. Another flash. He was 16. Got suspended for defending a younger kid who was being bullied. Evelyn said he should have minded his business. I told him he did the right thing. He said, "You always have my back, even when Mom doesn't agree." I'd forgotten how tightly we were once stitched together. How many late-night gas station runs we made just to get his favorite snacks before exams. How I stayed up in the passenger seat while he practiced night driving around the block. How I let him mess up, fall short, and come home late, and still left the porch light on, because I believed in him. And somewhere deep down, I thought that belief might circle back around, that it might count for something. But sitting in that airport watching strangers reunite at baggage claim, watching fathers greet their sons with backslaps and jokes, I realized, sometimes love doesn't boomerang. Sometimes it just drifts. and you learn to stop waiting for it to return the same way. I should have left, should have grabbed my bag, walked straight to the taxi stand, and gone home to lick my wounds in the dark. But I didn't. Instead, I wandered down the corridor toward the airport lounge, the kind with the low leather seats and coffee that pretends to taste expensive. I didn't even know if I had access, but the attendant looked at my face, really looked, and just waved me in without a word. That small kindness hit harder than it should have. I found a seat by the window overlooking the tarmac, the kind of seat people usually fight over. But that morning, no one noticed me. No one asked why I was sitting there in a sport coat with a boarding pass that led to nowhere. I sipped burnt coffee from a glass cup and tried not to think, until I saw it. Another post. This one from Evelyn herself. A short video, no audio, just her clinking glasses with Daniel, laughing. A voice caption below. Just the two of us, always were. I blinked, read it again. Just the two of us, always were. That wasn't a vacation. That was an announcement. They weren't building a bridge. They were erasing me. Quietly, strategically, publicly, with a smile. That caption wasn't for friends. It was for me. The final punctuation on a long sentence I never agreed to. My phone buzzed again. A comment from someone I didn't know. Love this for you both. Finally letting go of the past. I stared at that screen like it had slapped me. Not one word in that sentence was cruel, but all of it was. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always yell. Sometimes it clinks glasses. Sometimes it toasts to your disappearance. And sometimes you realize the people you'd give everything for have already traded you in for a narrative they like better. I didn't speak for a long time. Just sat there. The lounge noise faded, the forks clinking, low voices, gate announcements in the distance. My coffee had gone cold. I hadn't touched it. I sat with my hands in my lap like I was waiting for someone to come back and fix it all. But no one was coming. And the worst part? I knew they'd planned it. Evelyn and Daniel. Maybe not from the start, but close enough. I imagined them walking through security, glancing back just once to see if I'd followed. I didn't. I followed instructions. I waited where they told me to wait. Like I always did. I gave them space, gave them grace, and they gave me silence. You know, I used to think love meant sacrifice. Staying quiet when you're hurting, showing up even when you've been forgotten, putting your ego second, and their comfort first. But sitting there watching the plane I paid for disappear down the runway, I realized something I never wanted to admit. They didn't forget me. They counted on me being too decent to make a scene. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, and whispered to no one, how the hell did we get here? I'd raised a boy who used to chase fireflies barefoot in the yard, who cried when the neighbor's dog died, who used to say, "You're my hero, Dad," and now he'd left me behind. Like luggage that didn't quite match the trip. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there in a chair I hadn't paid for, in a lounge I wasn't supposed to be in, wondering if this was the moment I finally let go of who they were, of who I thought I still was to them, of the fantasy that love always comes back when you wait long enough. That seat by the window may not have been mine on the plane, but it gave me a better view than I ever expected. You know what makes betrayal sting the deepest? It's not the moment they walk away. It's when you realize what you sacrificed just so they could stand tall in the first place. There's a lot I never said out loud. Like the time I covered Evelyn's credit card debt just before our divorce, $12,000. She swore it was temporary, business expenses that would get reimbursed. But when I went through the statements, they weren't receipts from client lunches. They were dinners for two, hotel stays, jewelry I never saw. I confronted her once, quietly. She didn't deny it, just looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you had paid more attention, maybe I wouldn't have needed someone else." I swallowed that, said nothing, because Daniel was in the next room, working on a school project about trust. I didn't want him to learn that word could fall apart in a sentence. Then years later, Daniel came to me after college, said he wanted to start a business. Evelyn didn't believe in the idea, called it risky, foolish. I believed in him. I emptied my savings, the account I'd been quietly feeding for retirement. 30 grand, signed the check without blinking. He said he'd pay me back in a year. It's been 6, and I never asked, not once, because I thought that's what fathers do. They give without tracking. They lose sleep so their sons can dream a little longer. But sitting in that airport lounge, watching that photo of him clinking glasses with the woman who once told me I wasn't enough, I felt every sacrifice suddenly shift in my gut, not as something noble, but as something that had slowly made me disappear, piece by piece, dollar by dollar, until I became a man whose love was easy to use and easier to leave. I didn't plan on checking my email. I was just trying to pass the time, pretending to look busy, like the kind of man who still had a flight to catch. But there it was, a forwarded message, subject line, updated will, FYI. It was from Evelyn's lawyer, accidentally sent to my address, probably muscle memory. I almost deleted it, but curiosity, that quiet, dangerous whisper, it won. I opened it, and in plain language, line after line, I saw it. Daniel was now listed as her sole beneficiary, the house I helped her buy, the one I spent weekends renovating before it became her post-divorce prize, going to him. The joint investment account we started together, the one I left untouched during the split, to avoid more court battles, closed, consolidated. And according to the paperwork, my name had been gone for 3 years. They hadn't just cut me out of the trip. They'd been carving me out of the story. Slowly, quietly, like rot beneath fresh paint. Then I noticed something else. A short line near the bottom. In acknowledgement of James' previous contributions, no claim or restitution shall be pursued. No restitution, just a sentence, like I was an old utility bill, paid off, closed, forgotten. I remember setting my phone down. My hands were still, my jaw was tight, but inside, something ancient cracked open. Not anger, not screaming rage. No, this was different. It was quiet, sharp, clean, the kind of emotion you feel when you realize they weren't sloppy with the betrayal. They were surgical, and I had mistaken precision for progress. That was the moment I stopped waiting for an apology, stopped hoping for reconciliation, and started remembering who I used to be before I let love make me smaller. That was the moment I stood up, not to chase them, but to rise, for myself. But inside, something ancient cracked open. Not anger, not screaming rage. No, this was different. It was quiet, sharp, clean. The kind of emotion you feel when you realize they weren't sloppy with the betrayal. They were surgical, and I had mistaken precision for progress. That was the moment I stopped waiting for an apology, stopped hoping for reconciliation, and started remembering who I used to be before I let love make me smaller. That was the moment I stood up, not to chase them, but to rise, for myself. I didn't storm out of that lounge. I didn't send a furious text. I didn't call Daniel and scream down the line. How could you? I just picked up my bag, straightened my jacket, and walked, past the gates, past the shops, past the future they had built without me. I stepped out into the sunlight. It was brighter than I remembered. I booked a nearby hotel. Nothing fancy, but clean, quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the wall for a while. Then I opened my laptop, and I started pulling the strings, not with anger, with clarity. I called the bank, had them resend the old wire records, the ones that showed where the money went. I emailed the accountant, who helped me transfer Evelyn's business loan into her name after the divorce, asked him for copies of everything. I sorted through receipts, not out of bitterness, but for proof. Quiet, steady proof that I had built the foundation under the house that now had no room for me. Then I called a lawyer, not to sue them, not yet, just to understand what I still had, what I could still reclaim, what parts of me hadn't been erased in a line item. And all the while, I said nothing. No online rants, no guilt-tripping texts. I knew Evelyn expected an explosion. She always had a taste for chaos, a way of twisting it to make herself look like the victim. But this time, I didn't give her the fire. I gave her my silence, because silence is heavier than anger. And when someone has to sit in it, it echoes longer. I didn't want revenge, not yet. I just wanted to remember who I was, before they convinced me I had nothing left to protect. They didn't notice when I stopped paying the property tax on Evelyn's vacation house. Didn't notice when I had the utilities switched out of my name. Didn't notice when the quiet little LLC I once registered for Daniel's startup, the one I technically controlled, was marked for dissolution. No calls, no thank yous, no questions. Because when people think they've won, they stop looking behind them. I wasn't out for blood, just balance. Just what was mine. I spent years letting them eat first, years letting them rewrite the story so they could play the hero. And the best part? I didn't need a team, didn't need lawyers with power suits or long-winded letters. I just needed my name and the receipts. Turns out, I'd saved every one. The bank account I quietly reopened, mine alone. The deeds I kept copies of, dated, signed, legal. I stopped forwarding Daniel's mail, closed the credit card he'd forgotten. I co-signed. I canceled the life insurance policy where I'd once named him beneficiary. And when I logged into the cloud storage where I'd backed up old audio files, I found a recording from 6 years ago. Evelyn, saying, "It's your name on the papers, James. Just sign them. No one will question it." I saved that file again, labeled it with the date and time, not out of spite, but because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's legal, traceable, and impossible to argue with. The thing about people like Evelyn, and sadly, people like Daniel, when they follow her, is that they're always so busy looking for ways to win. They never notice when the scoreboard starts counting in reverse. And by the time they do, you're not standing where they left you. You're standing above them, calm, collected, and in control. There was a night, maybe a week after I made that last phone call, when I sat alone in the hotel room, staring at the ceiling fan like it had the answer I didn't want to say out loud. Maybe I should have walked away. Maybe I should have just let them have it. The house, the stories, the version of me they were so desperate to bury. Maybe that would have been the cleaner choice, more noble. I thought about Daniel. Not the man he is now, but the boy who once left me a Father's Day card under my pillow, written in crooked handwriting. "You always come when I need you. That's your superpower." What happened to that boy? And what happened to the man who would have died to protect him? I used to think forgiveness was the high road, that keeping the peace meant keeping your soul. But sitting in that hotel bed, with my laptop still open and documents still pulled up, I started to wonder if I'd gone too far the other way. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical, strategic, cold, and that scared me more than anything Evelyn ever did. Maybe I should have let it go. Maybe letting them win would have made me feel lighter than winning ever could. But then, I'd close my eyes and see Evelyn's caption again. just the two of us. Always were. And I'd remember, I didn't start this to hurt them. I started this to stop disappearing. Because the longer I let them rewrite me as a footnote, the more I became one. I wasn't clawing back property. I was reclaiming proof that I had been there, that I had mattered, that my love, my loyalty, my sacrifices meant something. So no, I didn't walk away. But I did start walking towards someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Myself. It wasn't some grand expose. No fireworks. No courtroom drama. Just one little slip. The kind that only happens when someone thinks the game is already over. It was a video posted by Evelyn's friend, one of those influencers who thinks life is a reality show and everyone's watching. A rooftop brunch, champagne flowing, music low in the background. Daniel and Evelyn at the center, glowing like they just conquered something. Someone off camera asks, "So wait, he really thought he was coming on the trip with you?" They laugh. Evelyn clinks her glass. "He paid for it. Might as well let him get us to the gate." Daniel chuckles. "We told him to wait in the lounge. It was almost too easy." The friend zooms in, capturing their toast. Here's to finally being done with the past. I watched it once, then again, and the third time, I didn't feel pain. I felt permission. Because that moment, that smug little joke between two people who'd once needed me, was all I needed. Not for court, not for revenge, for peace. Because when someone shows you who they really are, and they do it on film, with champagne in hand and pride in their voice, you stop grieving what you lost, and you start protecting what you still have. I saved the clip, titled it Proof of Nothing, not for legal use, just for me. For those days when doubt tried to crawl back in, when I'd ask myself, was I too harsh? Did I overreact? I'd play that video, watch the way they grinned, and I'd remember, I didn't start this, but I ended it. They didn't see it coming. That's the part that still settles deep in my chest like a warm drink on a cold night. It came in a plain envelope, no drama, no red stamps, just 2 sheets of paper, delivered on a Tuesday morning. The first was for Evelyn. Notification of a title transfer reversal. The house she'd been living in rent-free for 12 years. No longer in her name. I had never removed myself from the deed. I just let her believe I had. The second was for Daniel. A letter from the state. The business he thought he ran, the LLC tied to his startup, the one I quietly kept control of all those years, was now closed. Bank accounts frozen. Any remaining funds rerouted. No criminal charges. No scandal. Just done. Evelyn called that afternoon. I didn't answer. She left a message. The voice was tight, controlled, but under the surface I could hear it, the crack in her breath. She said, "You didn't have to do this." I saved the voicemail, never called back. Daniel tried next, said he was confused, said he didn't understand. I didn't explain. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I sent him a copy of the email he wrote to the accountant, the one where he asked to move my name off the books without notifying me. I highlighted the timestamp. They stopped calling after that. I changed the locks on the cabin up north, the one they thought I'd forgotten about. I didn't. That land was always mine. And now it was mine again, without anyone asking if they could borrow it for a weekend. I called the insurance company, removed their names from the policy, updated the emergency contacts, updated the trust, updated everything. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Not because I needed to hurt them, but because I finally remembered I didn't owe them my erasure. No announcements, no Facebook posts, no cryptic quotes, just action, quiet, certain, legal, clean. And when it was all over, I slept better than I had in 15 years. Not because I won, but because I walked away whole. They never made a scene, not publicly. That was the most surprising part. Evelyn disappeared from the socials first, deleted the post, removed the photos, rewrote the caption from "just the two of us, always were," to "grateful for new beginnings." But the silence said more than anything. Daniel never responded to the email. The bank notification was opened, but never replied to. I imagine he sat there, staring at the screen, realizing the foundation he stood on had been borrowed the entire time. They didn't scream. They didn't accuse me. They didn't call a lawyer. They just vanished. Because when people are guilty and proud in equal measure, they don't apologize. They hide. I saw Daniel once, weeks later in a grocery store parking lot. He didn't see me at first. Then he did. And in that single glance, that flicker of recognition, that flicker of knowing, I saw it. Not anger, not confusion, regret. Not because I had done something cruel, but because I finally had the nerve to stop being convenient. He didn't wave. I didn't speak. He got in his car and drove away. Evelyn sent a card about a month later. No return address. Just one sentence. "You never had to do it this way." I didn't write back, because I had done it the only way left, the way they left me with. But here's what matters most. I didn't go home alone. I went home with every piece of myself they'd tried to chip away. I went home with my dignity, with my silence, with my peace, and with something I hadn't felt in years, weightless. So if someone ever used your kindness like a step stool, then told the world they climbed up alone, I see you. If you've ever given everything, only to be cut out of the photo, the plan, the legacy, tell me in the comments. Or just write, I didn't go home alone. That's enough. And if you're watching this in silence, subscribe. Because here, we remember what they tried to make you forget. You mattered. You still do. I used to think healing looked like a full circle, like eventually if you waited long enough, people would come back around. That the pain would soften, the bonds would return, and everything would find its way back home. But some things don't return. Some people never look back. And that's the point, because I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not sitting by doors they closed quietly, hoping they'll remember to unlock them again. I no longer reach for a phone that only rings when it's convenient for them. I no longer stand in places I wasn't invited, just to prove I belong. The man who once ironed shirts for people who forgot his birthday? Gone. The man who once paid bills behind the scenes, hoping someone might one day say thank you. He's not here anymore. What replaced him isn't bitter. He's just clear. My mornings are quieter now. Not silent, just peaceful. I cook for myself. I sit in the good chair without waiting for guests. I keep the porch light off not out of anger, but because I'm no longer expecting anyone to come back. Maya visits sometimes, not because I need company to feel whole, but because she doesn't ask me to shrink. She sits, she listens, she never tries to fix what isn't broken. I laugh now, not often, but when I do, it's real. There's no final showdown coming, no apology I'm chasing, no moment I'm holding out for, and maybe that's the greatest piece of all. I was left at the airport, but I didn't go home alone. I went home with the man I used to be, the one they didn't want to see, and I've been walking beside him ever since. It was just a jacket, brown suede worn at the elbows, stitched at the cuffs, nothing fancy, no logo. Just something I picked up years ago, when Daniel was still a boy and money was tight. I remember telling the shop owner, it just needs to last through winter. It lasted 30. It was the jacket I wore the night I taught Daniel how to change a tire in the rain. The one Evelyn once said looked too old man for dinner at her friends. The one I always wore when I traveled, not because it looked sharp, but because it felt like armor. I wore it to the airport. I was still wearing it when I sat in that lounge, waiting like a fool for two people who had already moved on without me. After the betrayal, I almost threw it away. I laid it across the hotel bed, stared at it like it had failed me, like somehow that jacket had been part of the problem. Too plain, too dependable, too me. But I didn't. I folded it, packed it, took it home. And when I walked into that lawyer's office weeks later to begin setting things right, I wore it. When I opened the documents Evelyn thought I'd lost, when I changed the locks, when I reclaimed the land, that jacket saw all of it. It smelled like old coffee and quiet mornings. It creaked a little when I moved. The pockets were loose, but it still fit. It still fit. They tried to shrink me, rewrite me, replace me, but I still fit inside the life I built. Because I never asked for theirs. I wore that jacket on the day it all ended. The day the papers went out. The day the silence began to feel like peace. And when Maya and I sit out on the porch now, watching the sun slide behind the hills, she'll sometimes brush the fabric and say, "You always wear this." And I'll smile, because this jacket, this simple ragged thing, was with me through the loyalty, the love, the betrayal, and the quiet revenge. It's not just cloth. It's a memory I refuse to throw away. A reminder that I was always enough, even when they couldn't see it. For a long time, I thought the final paper would be the end. That once the documents were signed, the locks changed, the silence accepted, the story would fold closed. And it almost did. Until last Thursday. There was a letter in the mail, no return address, no name on the envelope, just handwriting I hadn't seen since the day she left it by the coffee pot. Inside, one photograph. Me, Daniel, a fishing trip. He was maybe 8 years old. His first catch. We were both smiling, sunburned, soaked, proud. And on the back, scrawled in faint ink, he used to ask for this picture every year. That's it. No explanation, no apology, no demand, just a memory, mailed to a man they tried to erase. Maybe it was Evelyn, maybe not. I stared at it for a long time, and for the first time in months, I didn't know how to feel. Because maybe the past isn't finished with us. Maybe silence doesn't always mean it's over. Maybe there's more coming. Or maybe that was her way of saying she finally remembered and just didn't know how to say the rest. Was I wrong? To protect what was mine? To hold the line after they walked right over it? To reclaim what I built, quietly, legally, without screaming, but also without forgiveness? I've asked myself that more than once. I wonder if I became the kind of man I used to warn my son about, the kind who chooses silence over conversation, boundaries over reconciliation, consequences over second chances. But here's the truth. They weren't sorry. Not when they planned it. Not when they left me. Not when they laughed about it over champagne. So what do? When the people you love weaponize your grace, what do you become? When your kindness starts feeling like a weakness they bank on, you either collapse or you claim what's yours before you vanish entirely. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't raise a fist. I raised the standard, and I never lowered it again. You tell me, was I wrong? Would you have handed them the last piece of yourself just to prove you still had love to give? Or would you have done what I did? Turned off the porch light, locked the doors, and walked into your own future without waiting for permission? You don't have to agree with me. You don't even have to like me. But if you've ever loved someone who mistook your loyalty for weakness, write this in the comments. I protected what was mine. That's enough. They thought leaving me in silence would break me. They thought I'd sit there, just a sad man with a suitcase full of forgiveness, still hoping for a seat at their table. But I didn't need noise to make my point. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just listened, watched, waited, and when they gave me the rope, I didn't pull it tight. I just stepped back and let them trip over everything they built on my name. I don't know what they told their friends. I don't know what version of me they posted behind my back. I don't know if Daniel ever felt shame, or if Evelyn still believes she did the right thing. And I don't care, because this is how I saw it. No secondhand quotes, no scenes retold through someone else's memory, no borrowed voices, just mine. Every breath, every bruise, every line they crossed. They never heard the sound of my heart breaking in that lounge. They never saw me collecting the proof in silence. They never watched me rebuild the man they discarded, because I never gave them the chance. This story isn't for them. It isn't for pity. It isn't even for revenge. It's for anyone who's ever been rewritten into the background of their own life and finally decided to take the pen back. 5 months later, the world didn't look different, but I did. I still lived in the same city, still used the same number, still brewed the same bitter coffee in the same French press every morning. But there was no tension in my chest when the mail arrived. No ache when a familiar name popped up and disappeared again. No trace of that man who sat quietly in a departure lounge, waiting to be remembered. The jacket still hung by the door. I still wore it sometimes, not because I was clinging to the past, but because it had survived with me. Daniel never reached out again, not directly. I heard secondhand that the business never recovered, that Evelyn had tried to refinance the beach house and found her name missing on the paperwork, that a few mutuals started asking questions, and all they got in return was silence. I didn't gloat. I just stopped expecting anything different. The greatest power in healing wasn't what I took back. It was what I stopped giving away. No more explanations. No more hoping. No more rehearsing conversations in rooms I no longer entered. 5 months isn't a long time, but it was long enough to remember. I was never waiting for justice. I was waiting for permission to move on. And it turns out, I didn't need anyone to give it to me. Let me ask you something. If your own child laughed behind your back, if the woman you once built a life with raised a glass to your absence, if the people you protected plotted your erasure, would you have fought back or just walked away? Would you have opened the door if they came knocking? Or would you have changed the locks quietly and let them stand outside? What would you do if the people you fed with your own hands turned and starved you? Would you stay silent? Or would you reclaim every piece of yourself they once used to build their comfort? Be honest. Don't answer for the world. Answer for the version of you that sat in that chair, alone at that gate, with no return ticket. If this story reminded you of something, someone, some wound you don't talk about anymore, write one sentence in the comments. Just one. I didn't go home alone. Or tell me what they did, or what you wish you said. There's no shame here. Only survivors. Only stories that deserve to be told, especially the quiet ones. And if you're still watching this in silence, you already know what to do. Subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because somewhere out there someone else is packing a suitcase full of loyalty and has no idea they're about to be left behind.